Directors to order. I'd like to introduce our participants this evening. To my immediate left, Director Keena Chadwick, Director Carrie McPherson Douglas, Director Cameron Fisher, and Director Shirley Olson. To my immediate right, Superintendent Stephen Cook, Deputy Superintendent Laura Nordquist, and Board Clerk Janet Bochnowski. And I am Melissa Barnes-Delakia, Chair of the Board. We have Erin Trimble and Hannah Westfall joining us for our ASL interpretation. And a Spanish interpretation of the meeting is being provided on the BLS School Board YouTube page. If you will now join me in standing, removing your hats, and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move to a review of the agenda. Dr. Cook, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Great. Fellow board members, are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing no changes to the agenda stands as noticed. We'll now move to public comment. I do not believe that we received any public comment, and so we will skip over the public comment section and move into the board chair report. For the board chair report, just a few things because we're on the summer. I did have my annual meeting with the Oregon School Board Association. A few things that they highlighted for us just to have on our radar as a board. One is that there was a shortfall in funding for early intervention, and so that's really special education, and they're hoping that that might get made up during a special session or during the short session, but for right now, there's a shortfall there. They were happy to see some changes get passed to support kind of as a crisis response, recruitment and retention. There's been a little bit of streamlining for teacher licensure, quicker licensure, but at the same time, I felt like it wasn't funded well. So easier, but still not funded well. Early literacy, as we know, passed. They're still disappointed in the funding level. They really feel that it's about half the level of what it will actually cost to do that. One that's pertinent to us is that the ability to provide a stipend did pass. It requires a vote, and it can be up to $500. So it is something that we might want to consider. I have to really understand it better. I haven't had time to really look into it yet. But one of the things that I would really, from an equity standpoint, like to look at is whether or not it allows us to provide a child care stipend. We have several people that have children who take time out of their day as a volunteer on this school board and have something available. But it's something I'll bring back for us. Once I know information, I can bring back to us and we can discuss. And then last, as we know, SB 819 passed, which requires parental approval now for an abbreviated day. And so those were the pieces that they really brought to us. The other pieces that I've been doing that I just wanted to report to the board, and you've been on many of these as well, but over the summer there's been multiple human resources pieces that have been brought to the board's attention across multiple school sites in the district. And so just keeping abreast of those while also remaining neutral is incredibly important because they could at some point come to the level of the board. And then the last thing in terms of a chair's report is really around Highland Elementary. I know that we had a very emotional board meeting at our last board meeting, a lot of public comment and a petition with over 1,000 signatures, I believe, to it. And so just a lot of emotion and a lot of strong feelings around Highland. I know I have met with multiple families. I know that other board members have met with multiple families as well on Highland. And I think that there's a few things that have really come out from this. One is that it's really clear to me that from the students and the families that have come forward, they really love their 3 teachers, the 2 that are being reassigned and the one that's being reassigned within their own school. And that's a real testament to those teachers. And so I really want us to be able to keep that top of mind. And it still can be the right decision and the right thing overall for the district to have a reassignment. And so both things can be true, but these families and these students really love their teachers. The second thing that's come through loud and clear is that the families are really excited about Scott Edmondson as the new principal. And so they're excited. They're active and they've asked around about his leadership. And so I think that we're all really excited about Scott and his leadership. The third thing is that people know a lot about organizational behavior and what works. And the things that work are relational trust and transparency. Unfortunately, those are the two things that you can't do or are really, really hard to do when it's a human resources and a personnel decision. And so just being able to recognize and name the rock and the hard spot that puts, because everyone knows that when hard decisions are made, the best thing to do is lean into the trust that you have and to be as transparent as possible. And in this situation, it simply isn't possible. And so just being able to name that, I think, is helpful. And then last is my ask, and I've made this ask to a couple of the families I've met with, which is really keeping the students at the center. And unfortunately, I think one of the hardest things with Highland was that the kids on that day got caught in the crossfire, right? And that was really unfortunate. I'm sad for that. But at this point in time, if we could keep our kids at the center, it's really hard, and it's really hard as adults if we're upset. But the thing that will help our kids the most and Highland the most right now is to lean in. To lean in and help our kids get excited about next school year and whoever their teacher is going to be, to lean in and help those kids understand that if they love those teachers, what a gift those new schools are going to have, having those teachers at their school with all of their experience. And to lean in and say, how can I help with the teachers that take their place and with our new principal? And so to me, I know that there is a lot of, that's a tall order I'm asking, I know it is. But if we really want to keep things with our students at the center, that's the thing that's going to benefit our students moving forward the most. And so that's all I have to report. Do any of my fellow board members have something that they would like to report on? All right, then I will hand it over for a superintendent report.
Thank you, Chair Barnes-Delaki. I have three things that I'd like to report. One of them is sitting out in the audience, so I'll turn that over to Jackie when the time comes. But the first one I want to talk about is the work of the task force. We had a meeting about 2 weeks ago in which we operationalized the one thing that we determined was the highest priority. And I want to do an absolute shout out to the folks that showed up. We had about 3/4 of our task force there in attendance in the summer, which is a powerful statement of the power that's drawing these folks into this work and really engaging around it. And I'll summarize the work quickly as really there's something that's elevated as the highest priority, and it's two parts. And it is the idea that each of our schools go in with an asset-based kind of positive, how are we going to ensure that students know and understand what our expectations are at each and every one of our schools. There's a title that many of you may have heard of that goes back about 15, 20 years called PBIS. And it doesn't have to be what is a PBIS model, but it's going to be something similar, which is clear expectations about what students are going to be expected to live by in each and every one of our schools. We didn't dictate that. The task force felt like it was not the right move to dictate what those would be, but did dictate to our leaders that it does need to exist in each of our 33 schools. And that was introduced in some fashion today in our leadership launch, and we'll have much more work to be done. That was the first part. The second part was if and when there's some kind of a disciplinary issue, having a very consistent set of expectations about how that's going to be processed, how that's going to be dispatched, what the feedback loop is going to be so that teachers and families are looped in on what's going on. Not necessarily that there's going to be more or less students suspended. It wasn't a call to more aggressive handling of student behavior, but it was a call to, we want to have some kind of assurance that it's being addressed in a way, and then some level of communication back. And so as we spread that information with our administrators, it was also we're not going to tell you exactly what that looks like, but there are going to be some things that are non-negotiables for how that gets recorded. We talk about what we call major infractions of our student discipline policy and minor infractions, and those can be treated separately to some extent. And so that has a pretty large sense of urgency and prioritization for the beginning of school. And each of our schools are going to use the time between now and the beginning of school to kind of build out what that looks like for each one. And so a lot of props to the work of the task force. My goodness, they did such a nice job of, when we had our first meeting, the amount of things and the gravity and the size of the things that we wanted to take on was far beyond what this committee was capable of doing and delivering upon for this fall. To get to this point in a matter of about maybe 5 months, 6 months, was a powerful collaborative effort. And Whitney Swander did a fantastic job of facilitating us through that journey. It was not easy, and there was lots of gnashing of teeth and pushback and struggles, and we got there, and we got there collectively. It wasn't like people just fled and left. So I'm very proud of that work. Yeah, of course.
First of all, I'm so thrilled to hear that you guys accomplished that. Second, I had to look up PBIS, so just for folks in the public, positive behavioral interventions and supports. But my quick question is, can you talk a little bit about, did the task force talk about where they wanted consistency across schools or not, and kind of a little more about the decision about what's going to be consistent across the district versus at each school, both from the perspective of, we have a lot of families that have students at multiple schools, or students are moving schools, so that kind of consistency, and then where is there more leeway?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. Let me pull it apart. First of all, the PBIS model is actually being packaged into what has been a longstanding structure that we have, which is called multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. You might hear us abbreviate that because we love our acronyms. It'll be wrapped into that. And when it came time to get to what's this going to look like, we actually broke into levels. And I would say, as a general rule, the elementary level had a more consistent structure across our 19 elementary schools, and our high schools had a less consistent structure, and it just kind of worked its way up from there. No, as it came out of product. And so there was a little more what I'd call meat on the bones at the elementary level. At the high school level, we said, look, and that was the group I was in. We didn't say you will have the following things like be safe, be responsible, be respectful to one another. What we did say is you will have a structure that has declared agreed upon norms. You will co-create them, and you will work and get student voice in them so that there's buy-in and collaborative efforts in establishing what those will be. Then you'll work on communicating those across the system. And what is it going to look like when students aren't adhering to those? And how are we going to deal with that consistency? Because especially at the high school, where you might have 100 adults, if and when a student is obviously not adhering to these, if there's an inconsistency on how that's addressed and dealt with, that's how the system breaks down. And we spent a lot of time talking about, for example, cell phones. If one teacher allows cell phones to be out in class, and then they go to their next period and that teacher's like, no, those need to be put away, it's like, well, you're the bad guy and my first teacher was the good guy kind of thing. And so that expectation that we can all get on board with this and those agreements, that's the way we called out the non-negotiables. I think that middle school, and I don't want to speak, I think Juan's downstairs. No, Juan's right there. I think, do this or like, no, Steve, you're way off. I think middle schools are actually at the point where they're talking about cell phones are going to be put away during the day. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay. So that was a non-negotiable. They decided as a collective group that mattered to them. I don't know if high schools are there. That's a conversation for the high schools to take on. And so while there's, we could have dictated that. We chose to let the levels determine what was best. Like I said, I do believe there's more structure at the elementary level and more agreed upon language that we're going to roll out with them, and how that then gets best administered to. But I think if you think of it from the elementary level, it's pretty structured. Middle school, a little less structure, but still more structure than high school. And our structure at the high school is you will have some structure to this and agreed upon co-created norms.
Thank you. And then one other quick question, because I'm not sure what the status was before this or now after this. Are school discipline policies public and transparent? Like, can every parent and kid and teacher read them and know them and be clear?
Yes, yes, no. The answers to those questions. We have a district-wide student discipline policy. It wasn't necessarily inconsistent administration of the policy. What we were struggling with the most was there was breakdowns in how, when administration was doing it, dealing with student behaviors, how that was being communicated, whether or not, and I shouldn't say it wasn't that there was some breakdowns, but that wasn't necessarily like a difference between the way it was being done at Mountain View and the way it was being done at Summit. It may have been even some inconsistency about administrators in the same building. And so just being more intentional with what our expectations are collectively. I shout out to Sean and Eric Powell Sean Reinhardt and Eric Powell for helping facilitate what does that look like and giving some common documents so that there is a better understanding. We didn't have to change policies on this, but we had to make sure that it was understood. Folks, we're a school district. These policies govern us all. How do we ensure that that's the conversation? And I would say there was zero pushback as we started introducing this today, and some appreciation for the fact that we're all in this together, so it's gonna feel a lot more like I have people to call when I have things that are, it's student discipline and dealing with that. I did that job specifically for 5 years as an assistant principal. It's mucky. It's not clear and cut and dried, and it's, it takes a while to do an investigation and find out all the players, and the truth sometimes is elusive and you have to spend a lot of time in it. And so it's not a small effort to say we're going to do this as consistently as possible. And so this is going to be a work in progress for sure. That's my first thing. I won't take as long on my second thing. The second one is just I want to draw attention to the fact that we just completed our leadership launch. We had a 2-day leadership launch. A lot of effective learning for our leaders, including myself. We had a 2-day focus. Yesterday was on safety and belonging. Today was on learning and leadership. And learning in this case wasn't just teaching and learning, it was also our own learning. And so there was lots and lots of time to work together to build common understanding. We did talk about good quality teaching. We talked about systems of how we're going to address conflict. We talked about what does it mean to be a leader that leads from a place of trust and inspiration, how we're going to build that into all the other work that we're doing. When you combine that with the work we did yesterday on establishing cultures of belonging in our schools and creating a baseline of every school is going to be physically safe to start with, building on all those layers together really set a good tone and a good tenor for the work that we have in front of us. And it really did box in and get tighter what our expectations are. So I am hopeful that as the year goes, we aren't going to hear the noise of frustration with there's too much, we aren't sure what our focus points are, and that we've really dialed it in for folks so that they understand and have a coherent view of what the expectations are as we build this path forward for this 23-24 year. And one of the things that's come out of these 2 days is this work can't all be accomplished quickly. There's a lot more to do. And I think we're starting down the path of establishing what are our values and beliefs that we want to spend in seeking deliverance, if you will, on meeting the board goals across the district. How we do that consistently and coherently will likely be a map for the next 3 to 5 years. So. Glad to take any questions on that. Powerful 2 days, and I'd say that with, we haven't seen the feedback yet, so maybe that's just my opinion, but we'll find out soon. Item number 3 that I forgot about after all of that. Student Voice Council, we are so excited. We have 3 of our students on Student Voice Council here today, and Jackie is going to kick that off for us. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you for having us back here. For new board member Cameron, great to meet you, and the rest of you. Again, my name is Jackie Wilson. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator with the Bend Pines School District, and then I'm the advisor for the Student Voice Council. Get this going. Fantastic. So really quickly, for those that don't know, or just a reminder, what the SVC is. It is the Student Voice Council. It is a council for the superintendent and the school board. These student leaders will be working with the school board, the superintendent, and other district leaders to integrate student perspectives into the decision-making at the highest levels of the district in order to create positive change for student learning, district policies, and school improvement. The SVC is an avenue for these students, the whole student body of their schools, to express what they think regarding important changes in education, policy, and anything that the staff and board are considering for Bend Pines School District. And I will pass it on. You guys introduce yourself when you head up there.
I'm Wes McGovern. I go to Summit, and what we're going to do as it pertains to you all is, in the simplest sense, to become a familiar face so that you all can lean on us with ideas, policy, get our own feedback. Because when it comes to schools and everything, we are the ones who are in it, and obviously how you guys might see something or how a leadership seminar may see something might not really connect or mesh well with what the students want or what the students wish for. And really our job is to be available to you all, and throughout the school year have a consistent schedule of all of us or some of us being up there with you, or at least being in the audience. So if you have any questions or any concerns or anything, we're here to be available, and that's what we're going to do for you all.
I'm Stevie Irvin. I go to Realms High School. So our plan for that consistent schedule is a kickoff meeting that's being planned for the last week of August, and then 9 monthly meetings for throughout the year. The Student Voice Council members will be required to attend at least 7 of those meetings, and the 3 lead board members and the superintendent will be invited to all of those meetings. Any other staff advisors that we think are important to be at those meetings will also be invited by Jackie.
I'm SC Bowles, and I go to Summit High School. And our goals for this school year is to create a system where our leaders are known in their school and can ensure that all of us can share ideas so we can be the voice for our student body, as well as to work regularly with district leaders and board members so that we can give authentic student voice to changes in school and how they are executed as well. We also want to have an annual projects where we have power and authority to create positive impacts for our schools and students. And our last goal is to be involved and provide feedback in district decisions that affect students. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
I think maybe less of a question, but just a comment that this is a two-way commitment, and so we just really want to hear what you need from us in order to be able to successfully meet your goals. So I hope we'll be in communication about that. But thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you on board.
Thank you very much.
I would also, more of a comment, I guess, than a question, but as I listened to Superintendent Cook talk about how the individual high schools are going to be developing their own sets of expectations, I sure hope, I'm saying high school administrators were willing to share. You've got some pretty brilliant minds up here, and I hope that they dip into the Student Voice Council members as well as they're forming those expectations. Thank you.
And that's it for the superintendent's report tonight. Thank you.
All right, we will now move to the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. Director Olson has moved and Director Chadwick has seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move to consent for information, and that will be with Superintendent Cook.
Thank you, Chair Barnes-Delakia. I do want to draw attention to, normally, this is a little bit outside the norm, and it's going to be a new process for us. We actually have a policy that we found a mistake that was, the way it was written, there was a line in it that was not meeting our current procedures, and rather than sending it out for review, we just made that edit, and we're declaring this. This is an administrative regulation, it's KK. And I'll call your attention to the specific part just so that you know where we're talking about. If you look on the policy itself, on the bottom of page 3, there's a line that we deleted that you see it has an asterisk there that says this is a policy about how visitors gain access to our facilities. The exception to this practice is in large school events, open house, music programs, first day of school. That statement was incorrectly calling out that we do not, when school's in session and we have an event at a school, it was incorrectly calling out that we stop our using our visitor management system, which is not accurate. And so rather than pushing this out, a simple correction for this, we wanted to make sure this was available, ready to go for the beginning of the school year. We're making this change, we're deleting that line, and we're noticing that to you all and to the public so that it's publicly aware. And we're going to use this tool as on occasion, I think, when it's not, there's not a controversy here on this. I don't necessarily believe. It's just it's a statement that we weren't administering to, and so we're making that change and putting that out through consent for information. And this process will be on occasion used in addition to what we normally push out for regular comment. We're going to try to be judicious with this because we don't want it to create the illusion that we are pushing things through that we don't want public feedback on. So I just want to call that out. I don't know how often that'll happen, but it'll be our goal not to make that happen very regularly. So.
Steve, I do have a question. Does that mean, I need to be very specific, does that mean that everyone who comes to a concert must check in through the office?
Thank you for that question, Director Olson. No, the boundaries and limitation of this particular policy are during the times of the day in which compulsory attendance is required. So the best example I can think of a large event that happens during the school day might be like a Veterans Day assembly that we have at Bend High that's been very well received and has had a lot of attendance. We actually still use our visitor management system to process all those folks that are coming in during that time. But a concert at 7 o'clock at night or a ball game at 6 in the evening, not necessary.
Can I ask a procedural question? Because I do think we've brought policies through that are just changes to align with actual policy before. So is the reason this one is we're using this accelerated policy actually more about getting it done before the beginning of the year?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Then we will move into Number 9A, this is very exciting. Bend High Design Construction Update, and joining us will be Executive Director of Facilities, Doug Pigman.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this evening I have the privilege of presenting a bond update for our 2022 bond cycle. And in the audience is BBT, and at the tail end of this, they're going to do an update for the Bend High component of it. Kind of a team update. Facilities Development Office is the team that is by and large responsible for administering the bond and getting all of the projects on time and on budget, ideally. Angus Eastwood and Mike Condon have been with us for several years. We had 2 new additions. Daniel Bogart, we were able to entice him to move from Utah and was a great addition to the team as a project manager. And then we were also able to hire Meredith Mackey as a project coordinator, and she was a local hire and a great addition to our team. The projects that we're going to be talking about this evening are our district-wide interior door locks, our district-wide fire alarm upgrades, Lapine High School gym separation, Bend Tech Academy, Building 100 update, and the Kenwood Lighting and Fans projects. The district-wide door locks project includes 28 schools. Of our 33 schools, Bend High will obviously be updated through the construction process. Caldera currently meets our district-wide door hardware standards. Realms High, Realms Middle School, and North Star all currently meet those. So when we're done with the 28 schools, we will have updated all of our door hardware to the current door hardware standard. We currently have 3 schools that are in the planning phases. Bear Creek, 3 Rivers, and Pilot Butte Elementary will soon be able to start moving forward. District-wide fire alarms, we have 19 of those. The rest of them are up to the standard that we are bringing them up to. 6 of those schools have started construction. Thank you. And are projected to complete on April of 2024. Lapine High School fitness and weight wrestling area. We're creating an operational wall between the main gym and the auxiliary gym to create this separation for fitness and wrestling. That project is scheduled to be complete 8/20 of 2023. And we have folding partition walls that will not be here in time for the beginning of school, but they will be installed as soon as they arrive at our first break in November of 2023. That's a progress photo of the old existing curtain, and after they have kind of demoed the area, it was a very large steel beam that they had to lift with a crane, cut holes in the roof, lift that big bearing member up there to be able to mount the wall to. Bend Tech Academy is getting a renovation of two traditional classrooms, a future center, and a CTE space. Demolition has started of that space. There was quite a bit of abatement, so the area will be basically gutted, remodeled, and reconfigured to meet these new needs for Bend Tech Academy. Rough end of the mechanical and electrical plumbing has begun, and we are projected for completion of 12/19 of 2023. Kenwood Lighting and Fans. We are replacing the old fluorescent fixtures with LED, and each classroom is receiving ceiling fans in the process. And that is projected to be also completed 8/20 of 2023. Finally, we have Miller traffic flow. They had a kind of a congestion area there. We were able to do some improvements. That has been completed. Mountain View High Cafeteria area flooring is currently ongoing. I walked it the other day. It's getting close, nearing completion. Summit High tennis courts are under construction and ongoing, and Juniper Elementary fans have been installed and are completed. Any questions on that portion?
Yeah, thanks for stopping, because I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
can we go, before we go to Ventai? A couple quick questions. The door locks, do we have a schedule for phase 1B, 2, and 3 like we have for the other projects?
If you remember right, we made that a CGMC project because of the level of complexity and not being able to really get a good definition of what needed to be done in order to achieve that. So we were very mindful about how we proceeded, and we actually took that first group of schools and pared it down to 3 so that we could get those out of the gate sooner than the rest, because the actual audit of that and being able to get that into a construction document to be able to actually be able to move forward with was taking a very long period of time. So at this point, we are getting ready to go out for procurement for the door hardware for the first phase. Once we get through those first 3 schools, we really will have a better idea of what that duration looks like and be able to plug that into our next, hopefully, summer cycle.
Okay, my second question predates you. But I'm just curious on the LEDs and fans and why that wasn't done when Kenwood was
There was a portion,
remodeled.
actually, I might be able to answer this. When the gymnasium ceiling was compromised, to put it lightly, that portion of the building was brought up to that level, but the amount of work that was done on the rest of the facility was not nearly as extensive. So this will bring the balance of the building up to LED.
Wasn't Kenwood recently remodeled?